The diplomatic ship of the Galactic Union docked at Earth's orbital station, with little fanfare. Most species across the galaxy viewed Earth as nothing special, just another death world, barely worth diplomatic relations. Senior Envoy Day stood at the viewport, his silvery skin reflecting the blue-green planet below. His six-fingered hand pressed against the transparent barrier as he studied what many considered the most dangerous inhabited planet in the known galaxy. Remarkable that they've developed spaceflight, he murmured to himself. According to all scientific classifications, Earth was a textbook death world, high gravity that would crush most sentient species, aggressive fauna evolving specifically to kill each other, extreme weather patterns that could change in hours, and unpredictable geology with fire-spewing mountains and ground-splitting tremors. His two hearts beat faster at the thought of actually setting foot on such a planet. The environmental suit he would wear had been triple-checked, but still, the prospect unsettled him. "Envoy, your human liaison has arrived," announced his assistant, bowing slightly at the waist. The human who entered the room was smaller than Day had expected. The briefings had prepared him for towering monsters hardened by their brutal world, but this creature barely reached his shoulder. She had dark hair pulled back simply and walked with a confident, easy stride that suggested no fear of her alien visitor. "Welcome to Earth, Senior Envoy Day. I'm Dr. Kim, and I'll be your guide during your stay with us," she said with a slight bow that mirrored his assistant's gesture. Her voice was surprisingly gentle for a creature from such a harsh world. "Your species has survived remarkably well on such a hostile planet," Day observed diplomatically, having been coached to compliment the humans on their tenacity. Dr. Kim's face changed, the corners of her mouth lifting in what his cultural briefing had called a smile, a gesture that could indicate either pleasure or aggression, depending on context. "Where I'm from in Australia, we consider Earth quite pleasant, actually." Day's translator must have malfunctioned. Pleasant? Nothing in his briefing had prepared him for this response. He made a mental note to have the device checked before continuing diplomatic talks. "Your homeworld has 60% higher gravity than mine," he explained carefully, wondering if perhaps the human didn't understand the scientific realities of their planet's differences. "Your atmospheric pressure would crush my natural form. Your solar radiation levels alone would cause cellular damage to most sentient species in the galaxy." Dr. Kim nodded politely as if he'd just commented on something as trivial as the station's lighting. "Yes, we've reviewed the comparative planetary data. Your homeworld of Nevi sounds lovely. Perfect climate year-round, no predatory species, larger than your hand, and virtually no geological activity. Must be very peaceful." The way she said peaceful made it sound almost like a flaw. Day felt his skin flush slightly darker in confusion. "The diplomatic team has prepared an itinerary for your visit," she continued, seemingly unaware of his discomfort. "We'll begin with the major population centers, New York, London, Tokyo, before moving to more specialized regions. We'll finish with a tour of my home country, Australia." "I look forward to seeing all parts of your world," Day replied automatically, though in truth he had hoped to limit his groundside exposure as much as protocol would allow. The regions called New York and Tokyo at least had reputations for being somewhat controlled environments. He had read nothing specific about Australia in his briefings except that it was an island continent in the southern hemisphere. "Wonderful. Most of our visitors find Australia particularly eye-opening," Dr. Kim said, that strange smile returning. "My family is excited to meet you. My brother has endless questions about space travel, and my father wants to take you camping in the outback." "Camping?" Day asked, his translator offering no helpful context for the unfamiliar term. "Yes, sleeping outdoors, under the stars. The best way to experience the real Australia." "Sleeping outdoors? Voluntarily? On a death world?" Day felt his protective inner eyelids close reflexively at the thought. "That sounds..." He searched for a diplomatic word. "Authentic." "Don't worry," Dr. Kim said, mistaking his horror for simple nervousness. "We'll start you off easy, just a few days in the bush with basic supplies. Dad promised not to take you anywhere too remote for your first trip." As she continued explaining the details of their upcoming journey, Day found himself studying this strange human more carefully. Everything he'd been taught about Deathworld species suggested they should be aggressive, suspicious, and physically intimidating, necessary traits to survive such harsh conditions. Yet Dr. Kim spoke with genuine warmth and seemed almost carelessly relaxed in his presence. Perhaps he thought the briefings had exaggerated Earth's dangers. Maybe the scientists had misclassified this blue-green world. It was the only explanation that made sense of Dr. Kim's casual attitude toward what should be a daily struggle for survival. How bad could this Australia possibly be, after all? Little did Day know that his understanding of what constituted a death world was about to be completely redefined. During the diplomatic reception in New York, Day observed Dr. Kim from across the room. The massive hall glittered with Earth's elite, political leaders, scientists, and cultural figures all mingling with the galactic delegation. Humans dressed in their finest clothes, sipping beverages and eating tiny foods that balanced precariously on even tinier plates. Through it all, Dr. Kim moved with an easy confidence, currently describing something to a cluster of his fellow envoys, who Day noticed were backing away slowly. Curious and slightly concerned, he excused himself from a conversation with an Earth economist and made his way across the room. "Is everything all right?" he asked, approaching the group just as junior envoy Tay, a willowy representative from the water planet Aquanus, almost spilled her drink backing away. "Dr. Kim was explaining how she handles venomous snakes at her family home," said Tay, her translucent skin showing the quickened flow of blue blood beneath, a sure sign of distress among her kind. "Just brown snakes," Dr. Kim shrugged as if discussing the weather. "They're the second most venomous land snake on Earth, but they're relatively shy unless cornered." "You handle them?" Day asked carefully. His suit's atmospheric regulator kicked in as his breathing quickened. "Well, you have to move them away from the house somehow," she replied as if explaining something obvious. "I usually just use a broom to guide them into a bag, then release them a good distance from the property. I can show you when we visit Australia next week." The other envoys exchanged alarmed glances. Day felt his first genuine pang of worry about the Australian portion of their tour. His research had focused primarily on the major population centers, and he'd assumed the rest of the planet would be similar. "Don't worry," Dr. Kim added, noticing their discomfort. "Dad keeps anti-venom in the freezer. We haven't had to use it in years." Later that evening, Day found himself at the buffet table beside Senior Ambassador Juan from the Galactic Corps. The elder diplomat had visited 17 death worlds during her distinguished career. "I understand you're heading to Australia next week," Juan said, carefully selecting something humans called shrimp with her feeding appendage. "I've reviewed the xenobiology reports. Fascinating continent." "The reports didn't seem particularly noteworthy," Day admitted, "though Dr. Kim has mentioned some concerning wildlife." Ambassador Juan's skin darkened, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "You weren't given the special briefing on Australian fauna?" "Special briefing? No, just the standard Earth package." Juan made a clicking sound of disapproval. "Administrative oversight. Australia contains 80% of Earth's most lethal organisms. They're ocean's housebox jellyfish with tentacles, carrying enough toxin to kill 60 humans. They have arachnids that can kill in hours, serpents whose venom causes your blood to coagulate inside your body, and primitive egg-laying mammals with venomous spurs." Day's secondary stomach lurched. "Egg-laying mammals? Earth has many evolutionary anomalies, but Australia specializes in them," Juan explained. "The continent separated from the main landmass millions of years ago and developed in isolation. Even the herbivores are dangerous. Their kangaroos can disembowel predators with a kick." Dr. Kim mentioned these creatures as if they were minor inconveniences, Day said, his appetite fading rapidly. "That's the most concerning part," Juan replied. "Australians have a peculiar cultural relationship with danger. They've adapted psychologically to consider deadly threats as simply part of daily life. It makes them somewhat unpredictable." The following day, the delegation visited the United Nations headquarters. As they waited for an elevator, Dr. Kim was scrolling through her communication device. She suddenly laughed, turning the screen to show Day. "My mom just sent this. A goanna got into the laundry room back home. Look at the size of him." The image showed an enormous lizard with sharp claws and rows of teeth, sprawled across what appeared to be cleaning appliances. It was almost as long as the machines themselves. "Your mother encountered this creature in your home?" asked Junior Envoy Tay, who had joined them for the day's activities. "Yeah, they come in sometimes during the dry season looking for water. This one's actually pretty small," Dr. Kim replied casually. "She just chased him out with a broom. You have to be careful, though. They can really mess you up with their tails." Day exchanged glances with Tay. Neither spoke what they were both thinking. What exactly constituted a large specimen if this was small? Later that week, during a formal dinner at the White House, a minor incident became a major diplomatic concern. A small spider, harmless by Earth standards, descended from the ornate ceiling on a strand of silk, landing on the table near the Nocturnian ambassador, whose species had evolved in complete darkness and held a cultural terror of crawling things. The resulting shriek sent security rushing in, but before they arrived, Dr. Kim had simply reached over, caught the spider in her bare hand, and carried it to an open window. "Sorry about that," she said, returning to her seat while several alien diplomats stared in horror. "Force of habit. Growing up in Australia, you get used to relocating spiders." "You touched it," whispered Ambassador Ullin from Proxima Centauri, her feathered crest fully extended in alarm. "With your skin." "It was just a house spider," Dr. Kim explained. "The harmful ones look very different. Well, except for redbacks, they're pretty small, and whitetails. Actually, several of the dangerous ones are quite small." She trailed off, noticing the growing discomfort around her. That night in his quarters, Day found himself researching Australia in much greater detail. The continent's history read like a survival horror narrative. The original human inhabitants had survived there for over 60,000 years, without modern technology. European settlers had arrived and promptly begun dying in creative ways. And even now, with all their advanced science, Australians coexisted with countless lethal species. In one historical footnote that particularly disturbed him, he discovered they had even fought a war against their native birds, and lost. As he finally powered down his research terminal, Day received a message from Dr. Kim. "Booked our flights to Sydney for next week. Dad's excited to take you camping in snake season. Don't worry, it's much safer than spider season." The unfamiliar symbol at the end did not translate, but somehow it did nothing to reassure him. The transport aircraft descended toward Sydney, and Day pressed his face against the small window. From the air, the harbor city looked deceptively normal. Blue water embracing curved shorelines, white buildings gleaming in the sun, and small vessels dotting the harbor. Nothing about it screamed, "deadly continent." "First impressions?" "Doctor?" Kim asked, leaning across the aisle. "It looks peaceful," Day admitted, feeling slightly foolish about his anxieties after the extensive research that had kept him awake for days. "The city's not bad," Dr. Kim agreed with a small laugh. "Though, we get funnel web spiders in the suburbs, most venomous spider in the world. Their fangs can pierce toenails." Day pulled his feet up instinctively, earning another laugh from Dr. Kim. "Don't worry, we haven't had a death since they developed the anti-venom in the 80s. The aircraft touched, down with a gentle bump, and as they walked through the terminal, Day was struck by how ordinary everything seemed. Humans going about their business, shops selling food and trinkets, nothing to suggest they were now on what his research had revealed was statistically the most dangerous continent on an already dangerous planet. Dr. Kim's father waited beyond the security gates, a weathered man with sun-darkened skin and laugh lines around his eyes. Unlike his daughter, he made no attempt at the formal bow of greeting that Dr. Kim had adopted for the diplomatic mission. Instead, he extended a hand. "G'day, call me Han. Good to have you on proper soil at last." Day carefully took the offered hand, mindful of the strength differential. Humans were remarkably durable for their size. The diplomatic team will join us tomorrow, Dr. Kim explained as they loaded luggage into a rugged vehicle that looked built for difficult terrain. I thought today we'd head straight to the family property so you can settle in before the formal tour begins. The drive took them out of the city and into what Han called the bush. As they left urban areas behind, the landscape transformed into rolling hills covered with strange, dull green trees that seemed sparse compared to the lush forest imagery Day had seen of other Earth regions. Eucalypts, Han explained, noticing Day's interest. They're designed to burn. Designed to burn? Day asked, certain he'd misheard. Yep. Drop oil-filled leaves to fuel fires that kill their competition. Clever, eh? Some species need fire to release their seeds. Day stared at the innocent-looking trees with new respect and fear. Vegetation that evolved to create fires. Another deadly adaptation he hadn't been briefed on. Watch the road, Dad, Dr. Kim said suddenly. The vehicle swerved, narrowly missing a large brown animal that had bounded across their path. Kangaroo, Han said casually. You'll see plenty around the property. They're mostly harmless unless cornered. Mostly? Day asked. Old buckaroos can disembowel a dingo with one kick, Han explained cheerfully. Best to keep your distance during mating season, or any season really. As they drove deeper into the countryside, Han and Dr. Kim pointed out various landmarks with stories that increasingly horrified Day. The creek where Han had once disturbed a platypus and been stabbed by its venomous spur. The ridge where Dr. Kim's brother had accidentally stepped on. A hidden eastern brown snake as a child and spent 3 days in intensive care. The beautiful yellow flowering trees that Dr. Kim warned contained enough toxin in their pollen to kill an unprotected alien visitor. By the time they reached the property, a sprawling homestead surrounded by fenced fields and wild bush beyond, Day's anxiety had reached new heights. Home sweet home, Dr. Kim announced as they pulled up to a wide veranda where 2 children played with what appeared to be a stick. Are they safe? Day asked instinctively. Han laughed. The kids tougher than they look? I meant, out in the open like that. Dr. Kim and her father exchanged amused glances. They know what to look for, Han assured him. Been teaching them since they could walk. My grandkids know every venomous critter within 50 kilometers. As they approached, Day realized with shock that what the children were playing with was not a stick, but a living creature. A thin, long reptile that twisted in their gentle grip. What have you got there? Doctor, Kim called out. Baby carpet python, Auntie, the smaller child answered. Found him by the woodpile. Harmless, Han explained to Day, who had frozen in place. Non-venomous constrictor. The kids know to leave the venomous ones alone and call an adult. How do they tell the difference? Day asked faintly. Head shape, scale pattern, behavior. Han replied. Basic stuff every kid learns. Inside the house, which was mercifully cool compared to the growing heat outside, Day watched as Han casually checked behind furniture and under cushions before inviting him to sit. Just making sure nothing's moved in while we were gone, he explained. Redbacks like dark corners. That evening, as they prepared dinner in the spacious kitchen, Han suddenly stopped chopping vegetables and held up a hand for silence. Day froze, his imagination conjuring countless deadly scenarios. Hear that? Han asked quietly. Day strained his auditory receptors but detected nothing unusual. Eastern brown in the pantry, Han said, reaching for a long tool that looked like a modified catching pole. Thought I heard scales on the tile. With practiced movements, Han opened the pantry door carefully, used the pole to expertly pin behind what Day now saw was indeed a well-camouflaged serpent, then scooped it into a secure container. Good-sized one, he commented, showing Day the captured snake. Second most venomous land snake in the world. Beautiful creatures, really. You'll release it somewhere else? Day asked, remembering Dr. Kim's earlier comments about relocating. Dangerous wildlife. Course. Just past the creek should do. Far enough it won't find its way back right away. Later that night, as Day lay in bed listening to unfamiliar nocturnal sounds outside his window, Han knocked and entered with a glass of water. Brought you some water. Nights get dry here, he said, placing it on the bedside table. Then, almost, as an afterthought, he bent down and checked under the bed. All clear. If you hear anything during the night, just give a shout. What might I hear? Day couldn't stop himself from asking. Han thought for a moment. Possums on the roof sometimes. Sound like someone walking. Dingoes howl a bit like people crying. Oh, and if you hear tapping on the window, it's probably just a huntsman spider. They're harmless, eat the mosquitoes. With that reassuring thought, Han bid him good night, leaving Day to stare at the ceiling, wondering how humans could possibly have evolved to consider this environment home. Just as he was finally drifting to sleep, a loud crash of thunder shook the house, and rain began hammering against the roof. Just a bit of weather, Han called cheerfully from down the hall. Might bring the inland taipans out tomorrow, they love the damp. Day pulled the covers over his head and wondered, not for the first time, if diplomatic relations with Earth were really worth the risk. The research vehicle bounced over another rocky outcrop, sending Day grasping for the handhold above his seat. They had left the relative comfort of the Kim family homestead 3 days ago, traveling deeper into what the humans called the real Australia. The terrain had grown increasingly harsh, flat red earth stretching to the horizon, interrupted only by scattered twisted trees and rock formations that seemed to thrust up from the ground like ancient bones. Nearly there, Dr. Kim said cheerfully from behind the wheel. Junior Envoy Tay sat beside her, recording footage for the diplomatic archives, while Day occupied the back seat with all their equipment. Another hour and we'll reach the research station. Day checked his environmental suit readings for the 5th time that hour. The outside temperature had reached 43 degrees Celsius, hot enough to kill several sentient species without protection. Dr. Kim wore only a light shirt, hat, and what she called sunnies to shield her eyes. I'm still not clear on why we needed to come out here, Tay said, adjusting her breathing apparatus. Her aquatic species required constant moisture. The research station has been monitoring the adaptation patterns of native species during climate shifts, Dr. Kim explained. Perfect example of life finding a way in extreme conditions. Exactly what the Galactic Union requested to see. A sudden bang from beneath the vehicle interrupted the conversation, followed by a grinding noise and an ominous rattle. That doesn't sound good, Dr. Kim muttered, slowing the vehicle. Steam began rising from under the hood and she pulled to a stop. Everyone out. Could be an overheated fuel line. They exited into the scorching heat. Day's suit immediately began working harder, its cooling systems humming audibly. Dr. Kim popped open the vehicle's hood and was enveloped in a cloud of steam. That's not ideal, she said after a brief inspection. Cracked the radiator on a rock. We're not going anywhere for a while. Tay's translucent skin paled further. The diplomatic vessel won't miss us for 4 days. And we're out of communication range, Dr. Kim confirmed, checking her device. No signal. We should be fine if we start walking now, she continued, moving to the back of the vehicle and pulling out water containers and supplies. We'll rest during the hottest part of the day and make most of our progress in the evening and early morning. Walk through this? Day gestured at the seemingly endless red landscape that shimmered with heat haze. My brother Wu and I got lost out here for 3 days when we were children, she said matter-of-factly. As long as we avoid the dingoes and find water by sundown, we'll be fine. You were lost here as a child? Tay asked, her voice rising slightly. Dad was teaching us navigation using the stars, Dr. Kim explained, distributing the water. We wandered off to chase a monitor lizard. Ended up having quite the adventure before they found us. She spoke as if getting lost in one of the most hostile environments on the planet was a routine childhood experience. Perhaps for Australians it was. With the supplies divided among them, they set off in the direction of the research station. Dr. Kim led the way, choosing their path with confidence despite the lack of any discernible landmarks. Occasionally she would stop to point out signs of wildlife, tracks in the sand, disturbed vegetation, once even spotting a well-camouflaged snake before carefully guiding them around its territory. By mid-afternoon, the heat had become unbearable. Day's suit was working at maximum capacity, and Tay's moisture reserves were dangerously low. "We'll rest here until evening," Dr. Kim announced, finding a small outcropping of rocks that provided meager shade. "Conserve your water. I'll look for signs of a billabong nearby." "Billabong?" Day repeated. "Waterhole," she explained. "They're often hidden, but local wildlife always leaves tracks." She disappeared for nearly an hour, returning with her shirt soaked and a triumphant smile. "Found one about half a kilometer east. We can refill our supplies and cool down before continuing." The waterhole was a muddy depression nestled between rocks with a small amount of surprisingly clear water at its center. Tracks of various animals surrounded it. "Is it safe to drink?" Tay asked doubtfully. "I'll filter it," Dr. Kim said, pulling equipment from her pack. "The real concern is what might be watching us right now." Day scanned the surroundings nervously. "Predators?" "Everything needs water," she replied simply. "This is probably the only water source for kilometers. We're visitors here." As if to emphasize her point, a distant howl echoed across the landscape. "Dingo," Dr. Kim identified. "Pack sounds like it's heading this way. We should move on once we've filled our containers." As they hurriedly collected water, Day noticed Dr. Kim fashioning a crude spear from a straight branch she'd collected during their walk. She caught his questioning look. "Just a precaution. Dingoes usually avoid humans, but they're opportunistic. Better to have something to hand." That night, huddled near a small fire as howls echoed in the distance, Day watched Dr. Kim calmly checking her makeshift spear and laying out sleeping arrangements. "Aren't you afraid?" he finally asked, the question that had been bothering him since they'd left the vehicle. "Of course," she replied, surprising him with her honesty. "Fear keeps you alert, but my people have lived in these conditions for over 60,000 years. We've adapted." "The indigenous people," Tay said, recognizing the reference from their briefings. "Yes, they thrived here with nothing but their knowledge and skill," Dr. Kim said, looking out into the darkness with something like reverence. "When European settlers first arrived, they died in droves because they tried to impose their ways on the land instead of learning from it." She poked at the fire, sending sparks into the night sky. "That's the mistake most visitors make. They see the hardships and dangers as something to overcome, rather than something to understand." Day considered how his own species had never needed to adapt to such hardships. Their homeworld was perfectly regulated, without predators or climate extremes. They had engineered away inconveniences rather than evolving to withstand them. "What would you do?" he asked carefully, "if we encountered something truly dangerous out here? If your spear wasn't enough?" Dr. Kim smiled faintly in the firelight. "Adapt, improvise, use what's available. The land provides what you need if you know how to look." She pointed to various plants around their campsite. "That one can be crushed for antimicrobial properties. That one holds water in its roots. The bark of that tree can be used for pain relief." A sudden noise made them all freeze. The unmistakable sound of something large moving through the sparse vegetation nearby. Dr. Kim calmly reached for her spear and stood. "Stay by the fire," she whispered. "Most animals fear flames." The minutes stretched as they waited, listening to whatever creature circled their camp. Eventually, the sounds faded into the distance. "Probably a kangaroo," Dr. Kim said, though Day wasn't entirely convinced she believed it. As they settled back down, Tay asked the question Day had been thinking. "How much farther to the research station?" "At our current pace, another full day's walk," Dr. Kim admitted. "But there's a complication." She pointed to the horizon where a strange orange glow had appeared. "Bushfire, probably started by lightning from that storm system moving in." "Is it coming this way?" Day asked, suddenly alert. "Hard to tell with the wind shifts. We'll need to adjust our route in the morning." Her tone remained calm, but Day noticed her fingers tightening around her spear. "Best get some sleep. Tomorrow will be challenging." As Day tried to find a comfortable position on the hard ground, he watched Dr. Kim take first watch, her silhouette against the distant glow of the fire. Her people had not only survived but thrived in this impossible landscape. For millennia, he had come to Earth thinking humans were merely stubborn creatures clinging to existence on a hostile world. Now, watching Dr. Kim's calm confidence in the face of dangers that would send most galactic citizens into panic, he began to wonder if perhaps humans, especially Australian humans, were something else entirely. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Union Embassy in Sydney sparkled with decorative lights. Delegates from 17 worlds mingled with Earth diplomats and scientists, their varied forms creating a living mosaic of galactic diversity. At the center of it all stood Day, no longer in his environmental suit but wearing a formal diplomatic robe adorned with the new insignia. Earth's classification had officially changed. The Galactic Union has officially reclassified Earth, Day announced as he took the speaker's platform. The room hushed. It is now designated as a crucible world, a planet that creates exceptional species through environmental pressure. Applause rippled through the crowd. Dr. Kim smiled from the front row, dressed in formal attire but with the same casual confidence she'd shown in the Outback. Beside her sat Junior Envoy Tay, who now wore a modified aquatic support system that looked suspiciously like it had been redesigned with Australian technology. Furthermore, Day continued, we have created a special classification for the continent of Australia, Extreme Survival Zone, Caution advised for off-world visitors. This earned laughter from the human contingent, particularly the Australians present. 3 weeks ago, when our research vehicle broke down 200 kilometers from the nearest outpost, I believed we faced certain death, Day admitted. Instead, Dr. Kim guided us through terrain that would kill unprotected visitors from most worlds, navigating without instruments, finding water where none appeared to exist, and protecting us from dangers my species has never evolved to recognize. He paused, recalling those desperate days. The bushfire that had forced them to change course twice. The flash flood that nearly swept away their supplies. The dingo pack that had stalked them for a day and a night. Through it all, Dr. Kim had remained steadfast, adapting to each new challenge with what she simply called bush common sense. When we finally reached the research station, Day continued, we discovered that the diplomatic corps had already begun memorial arrangements, believing no one could survive such conditions without emergency extraction. More laughter from the Australians. I have spent the weeks since then studying why my assessment was so drastically incorrect. The answer lies not in technology or physical superiority, but in human adaptability, specifically the unique adaptations of Australians to their environment. On the display behind him, images appeared. The Kim family home with its snake-proof fencing. Children in remote communities learning to identify dangerous species before they could read. Indigenous trackers reading stories from marks in sand that looked featureless to Day's eyes. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that allowed specialization, Day explained. My own people developed complex brains because our world offered enough security that we didn't need to focus on physical defenses or predator avoidance. The Aquanians, he nodded toward Tay, developed remarkable communication systems because their oceans were stable environments where information sharing offered greater survival benefits than aggression. He gestured toward the humans in the room. But humans, particularly those from Australia, faced such varied and persistent threats that they developed something far more valuable than any single adaptation. They developed adaptability itself. The ability to assess new threats, create novel solutions, and pass knowledge through generations, not through genetic coding but through culture. Dr. Kim's father Han sat further back, nodding appreciatively. Day had spent long evenings with the man since their return, learning what Han called proper bush skills. Just yesterday, he had successfully identified and safely relocated a redback spider from his quarters, a feat that would have been unimaginable months earlier. The Galactic Scientific Union has therefore approved a new research initiative, Day announced. We will be establishing cultural exchange programs where representatives from our worlds will live with Australian families to learn these adaptive skills, while Australian advisors will join our planetary crisis response teams. The announcement generated excited conversation throughout the hall. Several alien delegates looked notably nervous at the prospect. I am also pleased to announce, Day continued when the room quieted, that I have requested and been granted a permanent diplomatic posting here in Australia. My people have much to learn from yours. After the ceremony, as they watched the sunset over Sydney Harbour, Dr. Kim handed Day a small container. Inside was a tiny, harmless-looking spider with a distinctive red marking on its back. A redback spider, she explained. A reminder of your time here, completely safe, as long as the container remains sealed. Day laughed, the first genuine, uninhibited laugh since arriving on Earth. I've requested my replacement at the Navy Embassy bring me a complete collection of environmental suits, he admitted. My superiors think I've gone mad. You'll get used to it, Dr. Kim said, casually flicking a large insect from her shoulder. Though you might want to check your shoes every morning. Force of habit. As they stood watching the harbor, a group of touring aliens passed by, all wearing excessive protective gear despite the mild evening. Their guide, another Australian, was explaining the drop bear myth with such deadpan seriousness that several visitors were casting fearful glances into the nearby trees. You're all terrible, Day said, shaking his head as he recognized the prank Dr. Kim's brother had played on him during his first week. Part of our charm, Dr. Kim replied with a wink. When your environment tries to kill you daily, you develop a certain sense of humor about danger. In the distance, a massive cargo ship was unloading crates marked with galactic shipping symbols. Australia had become the hottest tourist destination in the sector. Aliens from across the galaxy signing up for survival experiences, where they could test themselves against Earth's most challenging continent. The tourism board says bookings are up 800%, Dr. Kim noted following his gaze. Everyone wants to go home and tell their friends they survived Australia. Day nodded, thinking of the report he'd sent to the Galactic Union Council. The words that had changed how an entire galaxy viewed this small blue planet. Earth is not merely a death world. It is a crucible that forges exceptional life. And its humans, particularly Australians, are not merely surviving their deadly home. They are thriving because of it. As the alien and the human watched the sunset, Day realized that the universe had much to learn from these remarkable creatures who called the deadliest continent on a death world simply home. 6 months later, when he successfully tracked and relocated his first eastern brown snake from the embassy garden without assistance, Day sent a single message to the Galactic Council. Perhaps we have been measuring evolutionary success by the wrong metrics all along. The reply came back almost instantly. Understood. New classification system under development. Working title, the Australian scale.